The Secret Journey of Alexander the Great. He only reigned for about 13 years, from 336 to 323 BC, and he was born 356 BC, July 20th. So he lived about 30 years, as prophesied even by the Archangel Gabriel in the book of Daniel of the Old Testament. So the secret journey of Alexander the Great. Alexander, Philip's father, was Heraclides, a descendant from Karanos, a descendant of Temenus, who was the founder of the Macedonian dynasty of northern Greece, who with the Argives settled in the area of Pieria, Imathia from ancient times. Aeacus, by mother, descended from Neoptolemus, son of Achilles, son of Peleus, son of Aeacus, and Aeacus, according to mythology, was the son of Zeus and Aegina, and together with Minos and Rhadamanthus were the three judges of souls in Hades. In Arian's ascendancy, Alexander many times invokes his descent from Hercules, the ancestor of Macedonians. And just as enduring and lifelong was his worship of his ancestor Achilles. Philip met Olympias, that is Alexander's mother, the daughter of the king of Molossians of Epirus in Samothrace, and during their visit there to be initiated into the Kabirian mysteries in 357 BC. Quote, it is said that Philip was initiated into the Olympian cult of Samothrace, and quote, the young bride was a priestess of the Orphic mysteries and initiated into the worship of Dionysus with more zeal than other women, rather jealous of their possessions of others, as Plutarch mentions, and she presented large, calm snakes at the gatherings, which, emerging from the ivy and the baskets of the mysterious ceremonies and wrapping themselves around the woman's thyrsus and wreaths, terrified the men. Before her wedding night, Olympias felt that, after thunder was heard, lightning struck her belly, and the impact caused a great fire, and then after it split into flames in all directions and went out. And Philip, a few days after the wedding, had a dream in which he himself placed a seal on his wife's belly. The seal, as he thought, depicted a lion, writes Plutarch. They say, Plutarch continues, that after the vision, Philip sent Chiron the Great to Delphi, and he brought an oracle from the god, who commanded him to make sacrifices to Ammon and to respect him more than all other gods. I sacrifice to Ammon and even respect this god. Alexander was born July 356 BC in the month of Hecatombion. He was actually born July 20th, 21st. The month of Hecatombion for the Attic calendar and Los for the Macedonian calendar. Three important events occurred on the day of his birth. The temple of Artemis in Ephesus, which was one of the seven wonders of the world, was burned down by Herostratus. The Illyrians were defeated by the general Parmenion. Philip's horses won the first victory in the Olympic Games. We know that they even had chariot races then. Alexander's upbringing was taken care of by tutors, educators, and teachers who were supervised by Leonidas, a man of strict morals and a relative of Olympias, his mother, who was called by others Alexander's tutors and professor due to his position and kinship. Near him, in the typical role of educator, is Lysimachus, an Acarnanian by origin, and later Philip, his father, correctly judged that his son's education should not be limited to the efforts of music teachers and curricular subjects like grammar, poetry, rhetoric, philosophy, mathematics, and art, but considered the work of greater importance. As a major treatise brought Aristotle to him. Yes, Aristotle was Alexander the Great's teacher, the most glorious and learned of the philosophers. Aristotle from Stagira, a student of Plato, designated the sanctuary of the nymphs near Mysa as the place of Alexander's residence and studies. The young man was studious, had a natural inclination towards literature, and loved reading. From then on, he always carried the Iliad with him in a luxurious box, Homer's Iliad. He was taught ethics and political science, but also medicine. And I also like to study with my friend Alexander, not only in theory. He helped his friends when they were sick and wrote prescriptions for treatment and diet. The most important of all is the fact that Alexander was also taught by his great master the secret and deeper teachings which men called auditory and visual, and did not spread them to many. And later from Asia, when he learned that Aristotle had published some speeches related to them in books, in a letter to the teacher he writes, Alexander wishes Aristotle well. You did not do well to publish the public speeches, Alexander wrote him. You did not correctly publish the audience of the speeches. Aristotle apologizes for the speeches that some had been published and others were not. For truly the treatise after the natural sciences, which has nothing useful for teaching and learning, was written only as a model for the educated. This phrase alone makes today's reader or scholar feel at least uncomfortable. In the summer of 338 BC, Alexander and his peers graduated. In the spring of 334, the Macedonian troops, as well as the troops of the hinterland, gathered at Amphicytis. In Amphipolis, they met the forces of Parmenion. The total fighting number amounted to 5,100 cavalry and 32,000 infantry. The crossing of the Hellespont and the first victory were near. As Eratosthenes says, when Olympias, his mother, sent Alexander off on campaign, she told him only the secret of his birth and ordered him to have a mind worthy of his origin. The journey to the east has begun. Arianos, Alexander's ascension. Arianos, Indian. Droson, Apostolidis, history of Alexander the Great. Pausania, tour of Greece and Attica. Plutarch, parallel lives. Alexander Caesar, and other things. Well, anyway, part B. A use and blessing in the oasis of Siva. Now, the letter from Brother George Gaki says, in 331 BC, the conquest of Egypt is complete, and Alexander sets off on journey that has been pre-decided and planned together with Olympias, his mother, for years. In March of the same year, he traveled to Ammoniada, the Siva oasis in Egypt, where the sanctuary of Ammon Zeus was located. The temple of Ammon was founded by the Arcadians who, in the distant past, under the guidance of Hercules, had campaigned in Africa and towards the Atlantic. Thus the Pillars of Hercules, the Gibraltar. Now, the sanctuary, writes Herodotus, is an imitation of the sanctuary of Thebes, which was also founded by Hercules, as was Egyptian Thebes. For Alexander, Ammon Zeus was a Greek god who already had a temple in Amphitheti in Halkidiki, northern Greece, and was worshipped in Dodona. The area around the temple of the oasis had been founded and colonized by Samians of the Eschronian tribe, and these immigrants in the depths of the desert created the extreme station of the colonial southwest dispersion of Hellenism. Particular attention should be paid to the reference made by the late Fourakis, a profound scholar and expert in history and prehistory, in his work Mixing and Recycling. The king of the Assyrians of Pelasgian origin, Ninus, was planning an expedition to India and scheduled a visit to the sanctuary of Ammon to ask for an oracle and a blessing, a journey undertaken by his wife Semiramis through the vast desert after the death of Ninus and her ascension to the throne. A pilgrimage that Perseus and Hercules also made. The journey was a huge undertaking due to the difficulties and dangers, the lack of water in the deep and endless sand, and the terrible southerly wind that brought great gales made the venture extremely dangerous. One such windstorm had swallowed 50,000 soldiers of King Cambyses in the desert. Almost everything took all this into account. Everyone took it into consideration, writes Plutarch, but it was difficult to dissuade Alexander from what he had decided. They were trying to prevent Alexander from rushing towards them, because even fate yielding to his influence strengthened his opinion. The fate of three powers, subject to opinion, makes it powerful. As far as Paratonium, he proceeded along the coast through a region that was deserted but not waterless, covering about 1,600 stadiums. From there, he headed to the Mediterranean region, where the Oracle of Ammon was located. During this phase of his journey, the help offered by God in his difficulties became more believable than later oracles. Initially, much water and continuous rains from Zeus fed them from the danger of thirst, and by quenching their dryness of the sand, which became moist and compressed by itself, they made the air more breathable and pure. Then, with the signs that were there for the guides had been erased, and the army was wandering and getting lost among themselves due to ignorance, some ravens appeared and showed them the direction of the road, flying and heading ahead, when they followed them and waited for them if they were late and left behind. And the strangest of all, as Callisthenes reports, calling with their croaks at night course those who were wandering and screaming, they put them on the right path. Plutarch describes the course vividly. And Arrian confesses that some divine power helped him. This I can confirm, as logical thought also agrees with it. And what divine intervention has I made in this that this image also has? They arrived in an oasis of Siva, which, like Samothrace, is located not only at the center of the 42nd parallel, but also in the same exact coordinate radius of the 25th eastern meridian, notes Furakis. The area in which the sanctuary of Ammon is located is deserted on all sides, very sandy, and without any water. The sanctuary, while occupying a small area in the center of the side of the sanctuary that has the greatest width, is about 40 stadia, is full of tame trees, olive trees and palm trees, and this is the only place that has water from the surrounding areas. From this springs a spring, which is not at all like the other springs that spring from the earth, for its water at noon is icy for the same one who drinks it, and even more icy for the one who touches it. When the sun tends to the west, it becomes a little warmer, and from evening until midnight even warmer. At midnight, in fact, it is much warmer than before, while from midnight it gradually begins to cool, and at dawn is colder, while at noon it is even colder. Arrian Alexandro Anabasis, chapter 4. Oh, my God Zeus! And when he crossed the desert and reached the holy place, the prophet of Ammon wished him well from God as from his father, as a father would have expected. And he, Alexander, asked if any of his father's murderers had escaped him. And when the prophet advised him to speak with piety because his father was not mortal, for he has a mortal father, he asked, changing his question, whether he had punished all the murderers of Philip. Then he asked about power, that is, whether he had determined for him to become ruler of all men. And when the god foretold that this too had been determined, and that Philip had found complete justification, he offered the god splendid offerings and money to the priests. That is what most people write about oracles. This is from Plutarch, Parallel Lives, Alexander Caesar. However, Alexander himself writes in a letter to his mother, Olympias, that he was given certain secret benefits which he will notify on his return only to her. Well, he never did return to her. Events of some secret divination of this kind let him return and speak to her alone, said Plutarch. He wrote these things to his mother, the priestess Olympias, who was also the daughter of the king of the Chaonians, Helenus, who possessed the speaking stone, which Apollo had given him. Apollo for the Greeks is the sun Sirius, which is the largest of the constellation Canis. Note, the reader can look for an earlier reference to Helenus in the trilogy The World of Daily Stars. 2 years after his death in Babylon, Alexander the Great, in June 10th, 323 BC, Ptolemy, the last survivor of his descendants, who had accompanied him to the oasis, would bury his embalmed body in Siwa. After the completion of the trilogy, we make special mention of the great Hellenic archaeologist Mrs. Liane Souvadzis, her shocking discovery and her adventure. We're in the summer of 327 BC, and Alexander abandoned Bactra and through the Shibar Pass crossed the Indus River. He marched without any particular problem to present-day Begram. He marched along the Kofi Na River, Kabul that is, and then into 2 columns he marched along the present-day road between Kabul and Jalalabad. After fierce battles and after subduing the Aspasians, the Gurai and the Asakis, he reached the city of Nisa, northeast of present-day Jalalabad on the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan. The city was, according to tradition, Greek, having been built centuries ago by Dionysus during his campaign in India. Dionysus built the island because he was the heir to the Indians, Arrian Volume 1. These are mentioned by the lord of the city, Akuphis, and he shows him places overgrown with vines that did not exist anywhere else in the wider area, as well as ivy. And now the supreme challenge arises before him, the Arnos Petra. That's where there's no birds flying over the area. This rock, writes Arrian, is an important thing in this place, and there is a tradition about it that not even Hercules, the son of Zeus, was able to conquer it. Not even Hercules could turn the rock into a stone unconquerable by Zeus. Now, the circumference of the rock is said to be 200 stadiums, that's 23,000 meters, and its height at its lowest point is 11 stadia, 1,265 meters, while for the ascent to it there was only one narrow passage made by hand and rough. Moreover, there was water at the edge of the rock, both sufficient and pure, because a spring gushed out there so that it flowed from it. Moreover, there was also a forest and a fertile area there, so that when cultivated it would suffice for the nourishment of 1,000 people. And according to Arrian, Alexander and Avasis, the Arnos Petra is located between the Gurai River and the Indus River Valley. The Gurai River, located between the Imau Mountains, present-day Western Himalayas, in northern Pakistan, and the Swasti River, present-day Swat, the northwestern Pakistan, which is downstream of the Hidaspers River, present-day Jhelum, in the Punjab region of northeastern Pakistan. From studies by archaeologist Aurel Stein, 1926, it's estimated that the Arna stone is today called Pir Sar and is located a few kilometers west of the Indus River and north of the Burner River in northern Pakistan, very close to the current border with Afghanistan. The siege was bloody and the resistance fierce. The besieged, writes Arrian, were amazed by the indescribable boldness of the Macedonians, that's Alexander's army. The expedition had to be carried out at all costs. For several days and nights, the Greeks fought hard in order to capture this impregnable fortress. So in order to achieve the capture of the Arnos rock, Alexander did not hesitate to use the body of the royal children, whose age was not older than 15 years old, and not one of those young heroes survived. Newer Encyclopedia of the Sun. The Arnos stone is accompanied by some information which for the man of early and classical antiquity, the Hellenistic years and the Byzantine period, was part of his knowledge, and this is due to a different education and world view. To today's reader, however, they will likely seem paradoxical, outrageous, unconventional, unscientific, and irrational. Philostratus writes, the Tales of Apollonius of Tinea, Book 2, paragraph 10. But he heard that Alexander captured it and that it was called Arnos, not because it was 15 stadiums high, because the sacred birds fly above that height, but because it is its top, they say there is a crack that draws the birds flying above, something that can be seen in Athens in the promontory of the Parthenon of the Acropolis. Strabo says about the fissure that existed at the top of Arnos Petra, Geography, Book 14, paragraph 4. It is a sacred cave which is called Charonion, a destructive one that has a blockage. Apophras means gate, exit, or entrance to the pernicious Charon. Apophros is the gate which the ancients considered to be the entrance and descent into Hades. Dictionary of the Greek language, G. Pape and Stefano. Fourakis writes about a channel for the promotion and reabsorption of etheric ions intended for the regeneration and experience of beings ascending from Tartarus to Chthonius and becoming human-shaped. So in other words, we're talking about an entrance to Hades and these demonic entities taking the shape of humans. However, this paradoxical information, combined with information that constitutes structural components of Greek literature, philosophy, and worldview, but also of other people, gives rise to multifaceted and multidimensional questions. St. Andrew, the Fool for Christ, in his prophecies mentions that Alexander the Great closed the gates of India from which 72 kings and their people are to emerge. In that year the Lord will open the gates of India, which Alexander the Great, the Macedonian king, closed. Then the 72 kings with their people will emerge from there, the so-called abominable nations. We're talking about Nephilim, demonic entities, which are more abominable than any abominations in stench. These will be scattered throughout the world. They will eat people alive and drink their blood. Plutarch on Oasis and Osiris, paragraph 356. Typhoon acquired 72 men as conspirators. In the Revelation of St. John, we read about the nations Gog and Magog, chapter 20, verses 7 to 9. And when the 1,000 years are ended, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations which are in the four corners of the earth. Gog and Magog, he will gather them to war, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. They went up on the face of the earth and surrounded the army of the saints and the beloved city, but the fire came down from heaven and devoured them. The 6th century BC traveler Scylax, who toured India at the behest of the Persian king Darius to record its nations and tribes, writes about the dog-headed people. In other words, they were the heads of a dog and the body of a man. There were in the mountains of the Indus River in central India, where they lived in caves and underground galleries, people who had the head of a dog, and all of them, men and women, had a long tail. The Patriarch of Constantinople, Photius the Great, 810 to 893 AD, also refers to the dog-headed. The underworld are large, huge caves inside the earth, which are connected to each other by galleries and tunnels, while on the surface of the earth there are mouths, which are entrances that lead to its interior, says Plato and Phaedo. As for the regions inside the earth, these are the continuation of its cavities, and there are many around the entire earth. We're talking about tunnels connecting these cavities. Some are deeper and more open, and the one we inhabit. Others are deeper, the ones that are, but their gap is smaller than the gap of our own place. There are, however, some that are smaller in depth and wider than our own place. All these regions under the earth communicate with each other at many points, with holes sometimes narrower, sometimes wider, and lead somewhere. And Homer writes, very far away to the point where under the earth there is the deepest abyss, that is what he himself in other places and many of the poets have called Tartarus. In the book of Revelation of John, there is talk about those who are under the earth, chapter 5, verse 3, and no one in heaven, nor on earth, nor under the earth, was able to open the book, nor to look thereon. In addition to Hercules and Theseus, the Sumerian king Gilgamesh also descended into the underworld, the Epic of Gilgamesh, tablet 9, column 4 and 5. And I do have the book of Gilgamesh, the Epic of Gilgamesh, in my playlist for you to listen to. So Gilgamesh traveled 1 league down, league deep was the darkness without any light. He could see neither ahead nor behind. He traveled 2 leagues deep was the darkness without any light. He could see neither ahead nor behind. He traveled 3 leagues deeper was the darkness without any light. Quote, I, Alexander, also encountered many nations that ate human flesh and drank the blood of animals and beasts like water. They did not bury their dead, but ate them. I attacked them, killed many of them with my sword, and enslaved their country. And they fled in disorder until they fortified themselves behind the 2 mountains called the Masses of the North, and there is no other entrance or exit except that between the 2 mountains. And I used every means so that they would have no other exit except that, and that at this point I built bronze gates, 22 cubits wide and 60 high, and I plastered them inside and out with lime so that they could not be opened either by fire, iron, or any other means. For lime quenches fire and breaks iron. Outside these most terrible gates I built another building with hard stones, each of which has 11 cubits wide, 20 high, and 60 long. Thus I secured this new building, watered the stones with tin, which I mixed with lead, and passed through it with asikiti, so that nothing could ever open them. And I called them the gates of the Caspian. There I locked up 22 kings. The names of these nations are Magog, Goth, Dog-headed, Nun, Horn-horned, Syrian, Ionian, Catamorgonian, Himantopothes, bell-like, Samandrian, horse-like, meaning centaurs, Epamborian. And these are from Pseudo-Calisthenes, Acts of Alexander. O Muhammad, they will ask you about the Dul-Qarnaim. I will answer, I will tell you his story. Dul-Qarnaim meaning Alexander the Great. We have appointed his authority on earth and granted him the means to carry out whatever he wished by following a certain path. He traveled until he reached the west. He saw the sun setting in a murky spring, near which he found a people. We said to him, O two-horned, you can punish these people or you can treat them kindly. I will punish, he answered, all the wicked, and then I will abandon them to God, who will punish them severely. Here he talks about one God. But he who believes and does good will be rewarded exceedingly, and I will give him orders that he may carry out in his absence. The two-horned one resumed his course, until he reached a place where the sun rises upon a people to whom we have not given anything to protect them from its heat. Yes, it is so, and we know all of them with him. And he followed another path until he reached between 2 mounds, at the foot of which dwells a people who barely understand a certain dialect. That people said to him, O two-horned one, Gog and Magog are corrupting the earth. Can you for a reward erect a barrier between you? The power granted to me by my Lord, he replied, is the greater reward than yours. It's enough that you assist me with willingness, and I will raise a barrier between you. Bring me several iron plates, sufficient to fill the space between the 2 mountains. Blow the fire until the iron glows. Then he said, bring me molten bronze, and I may pour it from above. And Gog and Magog will not be able to step over the barrier, nor to pierce it. And he added, this work is the power of the long-suffering of my Lord, and when God wills, I will turn it into pieces. The promise of my Lord is true. This is from Quran, chapter 18, verse 83 to 98. In the hope that the stimuli for reflection and the formulation of questions have been given to even one reader, I'll close by putting a question mark on Enzo Melk's assertion, the old rose exists only as a name. Do we keep naked names? This is amazing, isn't it? We're talking about closing demonic entities, closing the entrances of these demonic entities to take on human shapes. And these gates are referred to even in the book of Revelation. And it's these that will be open when these entities are to come out. Gog and Magog. Amazing. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. My Patreon account, the daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.